What's up, students? Thanks so much for tuning into this teaching. We are in a series called Just Jesus. We're going to be walking through the Gospel of Matthew. Pastor Diane and I are so excited about this series because as students, there are 1,000,001 things that are calling for our attention, calling for our allegiance. But when you turn down that outside noise, what we realize is that there is one thing that we need more than anything else, and that is just Jesus. This is week 3 of our series, and we're going to be looking at Matthew chapters 9, verses 1 through 8. Let's check it out. And getting into a boat, he crossed over and came to his own city. People think that this is Capernaum, might even be Jesus' own house. And behold, some people brought to him a paralytic, lying on a bed. And when Jesus saw their faith, notice that, their faith, he said to the paralytic, "Take heart, my son, your sins are forgiven." And behold, some of the scribes said to themselves, "This man is blaspheming." But Jesus, knowing their thoughts, said, "Why do you think this evil in your hearts? For which is easier to say, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Rise and walk'? But that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins." He then said to the paralytic, "Rise, pick up your bed, and go home." And he rose and went home. And when the crowds saw it, they were afraid, and they glorified God who had given such authority in men. Matthew includes the story of the healing of this paralyzed man, but he honestly doesn't include the best bit of detail that Mark and Luke include. Mark and Luke tell us that the 4 friends, when they come to Jesus, aren't able to get into the house because people are crowded in to listen to him. And so instead of giving up, they grab their paralyzed friend that they've brought on a stretcher looking thing. They go up onto the roof and they rip open a hole that's big enough to lower their friend down to Jesus. I'm up here on my roof of my in-laws' house, and I know that they're probably watching right now. So hey Dan, hey Jill, and if you're a parent watching, or if you're a student watching, I in no way condone the fact that you should be going up on your roof. But I wanted for us to see how crazy it was for these friends to roll up on a roof, rip open the tiles, and get a friend down just so that friend could have an interaction with Jesus. If you're gonna go up on a roof like that, you have to be a little crazy. You have to be super committed to helping your friend. And you have to be ultra confident that Jesus is going to be able to help. We'll wrap things up in this video talking about the friends, but I want to make sure that as we start out, we understand that these friends are not the main focus in this passage. I wonder if the reason Matthew doesn't even include the rooftop shenanigans was because he didn't want to take away from the real focus of the story. That's Jesus. It's Jesus that has the power to heal. It's Jesus that's able to forgive sins. And 2,000 years later, it is Jesus that we need to be focused on. It's just Jesus. I do want us to learn from the friends in this passage. I want us to be crazy like them, committed to helping like them, and confident in Jesus like them. And honestly, check out what Jesus says about them. It says when Jesus saw their faith, what he noticed was their faith. When Jesus looks at us, I want him to see our faith. The faith in high school ministry, the faith in middle school ministry, the faith in our family, the faith in our church. And how do we grow a faith just naturally? Not just trying like, I want to be more faithful, but how do we have a faith like these friends have? How do we grow in our faith so that we help like these friends did? So in our time together in this video, we're going to look at 3 things to focus on to grow our faith. And here they are. We're going to focus on the teaching of Jesus. We're going to focus on Jesus' healing. We're going to focus on Jesus' forgiveness. We're going to be focusing on these things in order to grow our faith. So first up, Jesus' teaching. In the story, Jesus' teaching is actually part of the problem for the friends. Jesus was so popular, so sought after, that the house was packed with people trying to listen to him. There was literally no way to get close to Jesus. I just want to point that out because I think it's an important reminder for us of how valuable the teaching of Jesus is. This, later on in Matthew, 5,000, it'll tell the story of 5,000 men listening to Jesus all day and not even thinking about food for themselves. Again, later on in Matthew, it'll tell us pretty much the same thing, that 4,000 men gather and spend all day listening to the teaching of Jesus, so set on hearing Jesus that they don't even remember food. And those are numbers that just include men, right? So we're talking about groups of 15 to 20,000 people going without food in order to hear from Jesus. And here's my question for us. Do we put that level of commitment on hearing the teachings of Jesus? Are we willing to go as far as hey, I'm going to go without food in order to hear the teaching of Jesus? As we've been sheltering in place, I've definitely been reading my Bible a little bit more, and my morning routine is dialed in. I love sitting down on the couch, having my cup of coffee, and opening up the Word. But on Tuesday, Tyler Taddy was on our Instagram live video, and he was talking about one of the things that was keeping him spiritually healthy in this time was starting the day with the Bible and ending the day with the Bible. And admittedly, I rolled my eyes a little bit. I was like, "We get it. You read the Bible before you go to sleep." But man, after reading this passage and reminding myself of the importance of Jesus' teaching, I wonder if I need to re-up my commitment to reading the Bible, re-up my commitment to hearing from Jesus. Understanding the teachings of Jesus are so important. I mean, we can do that by reading the Bible. We can understand the teachings of Jesus by listening to sermon. We can understand the teachings of Jesus by reading, a million great books that are out there. But that is so important for us because the teaching of Jesus helps to grow our faith. When we soak in what Jesus says, it helps to bolster us, to remind us that, this is how God actually works. Focusing on the teachings of Jesus. Secondly, focusing on the healing of Jesus. The roof is ripped open. The man is lowered down. Fast forward to the end of the story. Jesus says, "Take up your mat and get on out of here. Go home." And the guy does it. He stands up and he goes home, and just for a split second, forget that you've heard this story a million times, and imagine if you were there. It's like, no way. He's been, Benjamin has been paralyzed his whole life, and all of a sudden with the word of Jesus, he's able to stand up and go, man, what power? Jesus has the power to heal. I think a lot of times when we think about the miracles of Jesus, immediately in 2020, right, we think nah, that stuff doesn't happen. I just want to point out a couple of books that are really interesting. Craig Keener wrote a 1,400 page book on miracles. And what he does is start with the Bible times and go through history and just try to understand, hey, should we expect that miracles are totally done with and impossible today? Or could it be that miracles are still happening? And after 1,400 pages, his conclusion is, guys, maybe we shouldn't be so confident that miracles don't happen today. Another little shorter book is a book by Eric Metaxas. He pretty much has the same conclusion, that maybe we shouldn't be so confident in writing off miracles today. And just for us, I just want to remind us, let's focus on Jesus' ability to heal. What is it in your life that you think, I can't deal with this anymore? Jesus has the ability to heal, even now, even today. They focus on Jesus' teaching. They focus on his ability to heal. And the last thing that they focused on is Jesus' forgiveness. Jesus' forgiveness. In the story, the man's lowered down and Jesus can't ignore him anymore. And the first thing he says to them is this: "Take heart, my son, your sins are forgiven." And I wonder if this guy was like, that's great that my sins are forgiven, but that's not my primary concern. I'm here because I can't walk. I'm a paralytic. I'm paralyzed. Can you deal with that, Jesus? And it's almost like Jesus is saying like, hey, I know that you think that the biggest problem in your life is the fact that you can't walk. But instead of just dealing with the symptoms, I'm going to go down and talk to you about the root cause. The root cause of all suffering in the world today is sin. That when God created this world that we live in Genesis 1, it says that he looked at it and said, it is very good. But when sin came into the world, man, our relationship with God was broken, and this whole world was fractured and started falling apart. In Romans 8, it tells us that all of creation is groaning until now, waiting for the redemption, waiting for things to be put back right again. And when Jesus came, instead of just dealing with the symptoms of our problems, he says, I want to go down deeper and I want to deal with the root issue. The fact that you are separated from God, and more than anything else, you need the forgiveness of your sins. The three things that we can focus on to help us grow in our faith is we focus on Jesus' teachings, we focus on his ability to heal, we focus on the fact that Jesus and Jesus alone can bring our biggest need, the need to be restored to God through forgiveness. When we focus on these things, our faith begins to grow. Last thing that I want us to notice, right there in the beginning, it says, Jesus saw their faith. And he said to the paralytic, take heart, my son, your sins are forgiven. And I just want you to imagine Jesus. Jesus is looking up at the roof, and he sees the four buddies lowering their friend down. And he says, I see your faith. And then he comes down and he says, your sins are forgiven you. I love this picture. Jesus sees their faith and says, your sins. Jesus says, your faith. Jesus sees your faith and he says, I'm going to do a work of forgiveness and healing in this paralyzed man. And so here's what I want us to understand, is that as our faith begins to grow, not only do we have the opportunity to have a faith that God will work in our lives, but we have the opportunity to have a faith that God will work in other people's lives. Just let me give you a couple of scenarios. Man, maybe you have a friend who you know needs Jesus. He or she does not believe that Jesus is who he says he is. He does not believe that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And you just think, there's no way that they will ever have the faith to be saved. Maybe you can have the faith for them. Not that your faith is going to save them, but maybe your confidence that man, Jesus can help you. You can be a part of bringing that friend to Jesus. Not because they have faith, but because you have faith. One of my favorite stories is how the senior pastor of Three Crosses came to be a Christian. A group of 4 of his friends in high school just decided they were going to pray for Danny every single day and invite him to church every single week. And week after week, day after day, they were praying and they were inviting him to church. And Danny was just like, no, I don't go to church. I don't believe in any of that stuff. That's not about me. And he just kept pushing him off. But eventually, he just wore out. He's like, all right, whatever. Came to church, got saved, and now is pastoring a church of over 2,000 people here in the Bay Area. Not because he had faith, but because his friends had faith enough to pray, faith enough to invite, faith enough to say hey, even if you don't believe, I believe for you. And wouldn't it be amazing if the faith of our middle school students, of our high school students, was so strong that we were just confident that God was going to be able to do something. That God would say hey, I see your faith, and because of your faith, I'm going to do a miracle in this other person's lives. May you have the faith, not just that God would do amazing things in your life, but through your faith, through your prayers, through your passion to see God work, that God would be at work in the people around us.